So today we're going to take a look at MSTY, MSTR, and Bitcoin. We're going to see where they ended up last week and if we can get an idea of where it might be heading to next. And then we will update my spreadsheet for MSTY and CONY, as I did purchase some shares in both of those this past week. Hello my friends, this is Legend. So today we're going to, of course, take a look at MSTY and see where it ended up, along with MSTR and Bitcoin. And I also do want to update that spreadsheet because I did make some purchases and I did have an option play that did expire. So we will update my spreadsheet, see where my real average price is now on MSTY and CONY, as I do like to keep track of those real price or adjusted price average, right? So let's just go ahead and jump right into the Webull chart and let's check out to see where we ended up on Friday. All right, so here we are on the Webull chart. And as you can see, we're looking at MSTY, and I have a couple lines drawn in here. One of them at $22.22. And the second line right here at $20.58. And then, of course, we still do have our initial opening of the $20.38, and that's that red line right there. But the two blue lines here are what I am considering the channel that it seems to be within. Now, as far as in any kind of buy for MSTY on Friday, let's take a look at that. And so we'll switch it over to the Bollinger Band and see where those candles lie. So to do that, we'll switch the chart from the actual over to the adjusted chart. So we'll just simply go to the settings here and I'll flip it over to the adjusted, and there we go. And then switch on the Bollinger Band. I'll go ahead and hide these lines just to help clear it up some. There we go. Now, as you can see, there's our midpoint on that Bollinger Band. That midpoint being at $21.41. MSTY did close on Friday at $20.83. Okay? So we are down below that midpoint of the Bollinger Band. So that's item number one, right? As far as in a potential buy. And then we'll look at the RSI 2. And this yellow line right here, that's the RSI 2. So if I hover over top of the end there, you can see the RSI 2 is 9.95, which is below that 10 mark. Now my 10 mark here is not being shown because I hid the lines. But if I turn them back on, you can see there it is. It is indeed below that 10, okay? So for me, that could be a potential buy. But since I did purchase some shares already at about that price, I did not buy again at this day here. It was just too close to my previous purchase price. If it's going to keep coming down some, I would like to buy it a little bit lower price, right? Although that Friday it did hit both those marks, and that is a potential buy for me. But the key word there is potential, right? Not a guarantee purchase for me. It is just a potential buy. But that is some of the indicators that I look at whenever I'm looking at buying more shares of MSTY. And that is below that midpoint on the Bollinger Band. I prefer it down at the bottom of the Bollinger Band, but definitely below the midpoint. And then I want the RSI 2 below 10. So when those two things are true, then I can look to buy more shares and decide if I'm going to or not. So to get an idea of where MSTY is heading, or has been, right, let's take a look at MSTR. And here we are on MSTR. As you can see, it is 2 below that midpoint, and that RSI 2 is below the 10. Just barely, but it is below it. So that could be a potential buy there as well. And that would have been a pretty nice little purchase price at around that 405 point. And I did have an order to purchase more shares of Mr. I had put an order in for 2 additional shares at 403. Now you can see that the low here did get as low as 402.20. But when I put that order in, it was already moving back up. So I put it in at 403, hoping that it was going to kind of come back down just a little bit, but it didn't, right? It just kind of kept on moving up. And if I look at the 5-minute chart, I can be able to show you a little bit better what I mean. All right, so here we are on the 5-minute chart, and I had put my order of 403 at about 11:01 was the time. So if we hover over here, right there's the 11 o'clock, and it got as low as 403.80, right? So I put that 403 order to purchase 2 shares, thinking that it would kind of come down and pick me up, right? Well, the next 5 minutes here puts a closing price at 11:05 of 403.82 and the low price of 403.31. So close, right? Still just so close. And the next candle, how low did it get? It got to 403.20. It is still just knocking on the door of my 403 even purchase price. It just never got back down after this point. So after about 10 minutes after 11, it really just kind of kept on going up. Now it did fall back down toward the end of the day there. As you can see, it got as low as at 405.35 before closing at 405.89. But my order that I put in was at 11:01, which is about right there. And it just got very, very close to the 403, but it just never did drop low enough. I needed to drop 20 more cents, and then I could have picked up another 2 shares at 403. But that's just the way it is when you put an order in. You don't know if it's going to get there or not. But you put a price in that you feel is a good buy, and if it gets there, awesome. If it doesn't, oh well, better luck next time, right? That's just how it is. But you can see over here, around about the time of 9:50 a.m., and this is on Friday, it went as low as at 402.20. So I didn't think the 403 even, I didn't feel like that was too far-fetched. But it just didn't make it. And that's just how it goes, right? So I hate I missed that 403 buy, but I'll just have to wait for another day. So let me switch it back over to the day interval, and let's slide it back over to our existing candles here. And I'm going to zoom in, and there we go. So on Mr. here, you can see that I've had a couple lines drawn in here for a while now, and this one here was a previous resistance before it broke up above it. Then it becomes a support line, and we are indeed testing that support line currently. Right? On Friday, it did test that support line. And that support line that I've got is at 404.13. Now I've got a resistance line right here of about 440.58. And this is basically that channel that I am seeing that it is within. Now this middle line right here, you can see if I scroll on back, that was a previous resistance line right there. Right? Now we did go through it. And here we are below it, but it's a green candle. And here we're below it, but again, it's a green candle. And I prefer a red candle for a confirmation, because you can have false breakouts, right? You can have false breakdowns and false breakouts, right? A false breakdown would be having a candle that went through it, confirmed underneath, and then all of a sudden shoot right back up into the zone here. That would be considered a false breakdown, right? Because it broke down, but then shot back up into the zone here. So that confirmation of that breakdown didn't hold. And the same thing for a false breakout is whenever you break out the top side and you get a confirmation, and then it falls back into the zone here. That would be a false breakout. Kind of like what we're seeing right here, right? Where we did come out We did come down, we did test it, right? It touched it, so we can necessarily switch this from a resistance to a support. And then right here, it looks like it touched it again. So that cannot be considered a confirmation candle. And also the fact that it was red. Now this candle here is green. It is above it. So this one here could be considered your confirmation candle. But what happened? Well, it came out the next day here, and you have this indecision, right? You got this little body with a long wick on top and a long wick on the bottom. That's an indecision of the market, so it doesn't know what to do here. And then what did it do the next day? It fell, and it fell right back into the zone, right? Fell right back into the zone. So this here would be a false breakout. Here you can see you get your confirmation candle that it did break out of this line, right? And then it keeps moving up. Now eventually, sure, it can come right back on down into the zone. But whenever you have the next candle or two fall right back into the zone, then you can consider that as a false breakout or a false breakdown. So I just wanted to show that there. Now, do keep in mind, these candles here, the last couple of candles we've had, are doji candles, right? You do see them with a little small body, and that's this fat piece, right? This the big colored piece here that you see, the big block. These two have very thin bodies, because that's the body of the candle, and then the top of it, that little stick that's sticking up, that's a wick, and the stick down is a wick, okay? So that body is very thin, and here the body's very thin with a wick on top and a wick on bottom. Both of those are indecisions in the market, even though it is still moving and it is continually to move down. But we are coming up on a bit of a support line right here. So we'll see come Monday, can we hold that support line? Now, a couple of the things that are going against us to see if we can hold that support line are the fact that the momentum bars here are getting a little longer on the red side, right? And that means that momentum on the red side or the downside is increasing. We do have this separation on the MACD. It is separating a little bit more from the day before. And you can see on the RSI 14, it went from 51.3 down to 47.8. So there is some negative momentum here that's pushing this on down. So we'll see how strong this support line at 404.13 is. We could get a slight break below it and then hopefully moving back up to show that this is indeed a support line. But if the momentum here keeps increasing on the negative side, then we could break below this. And if we do break below it down here, we probably won't see these doji candles. We'll probably see more of a red candle as it's coming on down, right? And at that point, we would be looking for it to come all the way down to something along the 392 area right here. And if I draw a line right there and show you why I'm using that line, and I'm just eyeballing this one here, right? So I've got it right now to roughly that 392, 393. As you can see where it did break up and went down, it bounced here and then went up, right? Same thing over here where it went up, hit it, came back down. So this line here seems to be a bit of a support line as well. So if we break below this 404, we could be looking to the next support line of about 393. So just an idea of where it could be going if that momentum keeps increasing on the negative side. But if we do bounce off of this support line, we could be moving back up. And that would be awesome, right? So let's just check out Bitcoin and let's see where it's at. All right, so we're looking at Bitcoin now. And I do have this bottom line here drawn in as a bit of a support line, right? That's where it did come down to. So we're going to call that our support line. And we're going to use this line here as our resistance line. It did come up to this point here. It looks like it did close about at that point. and it did open the next day at about that point, right? So there is a bit of selling pressure up in this area, right? So that selling pressure will push the price on down, whereas this is a bit of a buying pressure area, and that's going to want to push that price back up. And that's kind of what's going on here. It just keeps getting pushed up and pushed down, staying within roughly this range here. So this is basically our channel that Bitcoin seems to be staying within here recently. Now we are moving back up. The momentum here is red, but look, it is starting to decrease on the negative side, right? So that means it is wanting to try to move up positively. And if we can start getting back into the green bars and getting some positive momentum, that would be great. But right now, it's just kind of staying within that range of 120 to 114 and just hanging out there and chilling. So we'll give it some time and maybe we can get it to move on up and out, right? That would be what I'd love to see. So the last one we want to take a look at is with CONY, because I did make a purchase in CONY as well. And we will update my spreadsheet on CONY and MSTY here shortly. All right, so here we are on CONY, and we are still slightly above the midpoint on CONY for the Bollinger Band, right? It is still above that midpoint. So it's not necessarily in my buy zone, but I did purchase a few shares at the X date on the 24th. And I did buy about 10 shares at $9 per share, as I need to work on this one as well to get my average down on CONY. Now, I did not purchase any more on this day, even though the RSI2 is below 10, right? But it's not below the midpoint of that Bollinger Band. I prefer it to be down below that midpoint, and closer to the bottom would be even better, right? But if it does drop down below that midpoint on that Bollinger Band, then I will look to buy more shares for sure, especially if it's below the mid and that RSI2 is below 10. So I'm not going to go too much into depth with CONY here, as I do want to get over to my spreadsheets and let's update that. So let's just go ahead and do that. Let's just go ahead and move right over to my spreadsheet and let's enter in my new positions that I did make this past week, as I am curious of what my new average is. All right, so here we are on my spreadsheet here, and this is the same one that I've been using. This is Rev 2, as you can see right here. It is Rev 2, and if you have already purchased this sheet and you do not have the newest version, you can simply just go to that same email and re-download the new sheet and just move your information from your old sheet over to the new sheet, and you should be good to go. Now, I've got several videos of what all this here covers and what it shows, so I'm not going to necessarily go back through all of that, but I do want to point out the one thing that I always like to use, and the most important for me, is this adjusted price per share. And that's my real price per share, right? It is $2.66 per share that I have at risk with MSTY currently. Now, this has nothing to do with the price of the stock, right? It has nothing to do with the price of the stock. This only takes into account the distributions and the premium I have earned, subtracted from the total capital I have invested to help calculate my calculated adjusted capital invested, right? This is the amount of money that I still have at risk. Divide that by the number of shares, gives me my $2.66 here. And that is what I still have at risk per share. So to me, that is my real price per share. Once that becomes zero, I am free and clear and own my shares. Now, if I was to sell MSTY, right? Sell it outright at the current price that is shown on this sheet, And at the time of this video, it's $20.83. And if I was to sell all 420 shares, I will clear $7,632.12. Now that's not this amount on top of my distributions that I've earned and premium. This is the total that I will clear, right? Because I've paid the $10,500, I've earned $9,300 here, and then I would be selling my shares at $20.83. So therefore, this here will be what I actually clear, right? So I will actually make $7,632.12 off of this entire position if I closed my MSTY position at the shown current price of $20.83. I hope that makes sense. No pun intended. And this top up here, all it's telling you is that if we make an average distribution of $1.96, it will take me 2 payments of that amount to get this paid off, right? It would actually be less than 2, but you can't get a partial distribution. So you would still need both those distributions. Now, if the next distribution is $2.66, then that will cover all of it, and it will then show paid. But this $1.96 here, that is the current average that I have, right, of the distributions that I have earned. And that's a weighted average, weighing the earliest, which is on 7/3, right? Weighing that number as a higher weighted value than the one back in September of $1.85, or even October of $4.19, right? So this is a weighted average, and using that weighted average, I'm looking at 2 more payments before I am paid off. So if you're interested in this sheet here, you're more than welcome to get a copy of this by clicking the Buy Me a Coffee link at the top of the comments or in the description to get access to this sheet. And if you already have it, I just want to say thank you. So let's just go ahead and enter in my new stock purchase of MSTY. So we'll look here at the individual stock purchases here, and we'll scroll down to my next open entry. And the date that I did this on was July 23rd, and it was at a 20.95, right, per share, and I bought 5 shares. So that calculates the total amount that I spent, and I can scroll back up, and you will notice that that 266 now went to 287, right? It went up. Well, why is that? Well, because I just purchased shares at $20.95, which is more than $2.66, right? So therefore, that average does increase. Now, what did go down was the purchased share average. Now, this average did go down. It was 25.01, and it's now 24.96. Well, that went down because the purchases that I did make was under the 25.01. So therefore, that does lower this. And this is just my flat out straight average share price, right? The buy price that I purchased those shares at, that is my average price per share there. It's just this one over here, that's my real price per share, because that takes into account my distributions that I've earned and the premium that I've earned, because that is money in my pocket. I did not roll this money. If you were rolling or had drip on, right, where you're reinvesting your distributions back in, then these distributions, if you've rolled them all back in, the distributions earned here will still show that amount that you did earn. But the total capital invested would actually be increasing because you would need to be entering in another purchase, right? So you'll enter in your distribution you made, but you'll also enter in the purchase that you also turned right around and made. So therefore, it cancels it out, right? So if you've been dripping the entire time, then your adjusted price per share here, or your real price per share, will be the exact same number as your purchased share average over here, because you don't have any additional money that offsets the total capital invested. So the other change that I need to make on this sheet was an option that did expire. And let's slide right over. And since I was on vacation, I did not get to update this sheet. So here we'll see that this expiration for July 18th of a put at a strike of $20, right? So if the price of Misty went down or below $20, then I would have had to purchase those shares at $20 on 7/18, right? Well, if we look at the chart, and let's just go right back to the chart here, and let's go back to Misty, and here, this big red candle, this big huge drop right there, if it did go below that $20, which is all the way down to about right here where my cursor is, if that would have dropped all the way down to there, then I would have been assigned those shares. But as I was looking at this, since it did open at about $22.90, I did not feel that I was in any jeopardy of it being assigned, unless just something crazy happened, right? Because that's a huge move down from $22.90 down to $20 even. So I let that one ride out, and since it did not get down that low, it expired worthless. Now, what does that mean? Well, that just means that the contract itself did not execute because the price of Misty did not get to or under $20. So therefore, the contract just expires and goes away, right? I don't have to pay to close it. It just closes. So for this one, I don't have to do anything except change the text red and cross it out because it is no more. So I'll turn it to red here, and then I will cross it out because that was closed out. Now, what does that do for me, right? What does it do? Well, I was on the hook for 100 shares at $20. So that is a risk. That's an open risk. But by closing this or it expiring worthless, that goes away. Therefore, I also reduce my risk of having to purchase those shares at $20. Now I have another one right here that will expire on August 15th. And if Misty gets down to $20 for that one, I could be buying those shares at $20. Now I can roll it further out and try to roll it down. And I have already done that once because it was at $22. That was expiring on 7/18 as well. Now that one, had I not rolled it, since it was at 22 and was going to expire on 7/18, now that one we can look at on the chart and I can show you what would have happened there. So on 7/18 is this big red candle, right? And I had it at 22. And according to the candles before, it looked like it would have been okay. But then that Friday came out, and how low did it get? Well, it went as low as $21.50. Now, I would not have been automatically assigned. It would have waited until closing, and it closed at $21.68. So I would have had to purchase those shares at $22 because it closed that day at $21.68, which is below the 22, and therefore I would have had to own those shares at $22 each. And that's 100 shares per contract, and I had one contract. Now, my main reason, not that I'm saying that's a bad buy, but I'm just saying that my number one goal is to get my Misty shares paid off, right? And that $2.66 that it was, if I would have purchased those shares, that would have went up, right? And I was willing to pay to close before getting assigned because I would much rather pay to close that if I could not roll it than to own them and mess up my overall goal of getting Misty paid off. Now, don't get me wrong. What I could end up doing, right? I mean, I could sell some shares to get this real price per share to zero. And at that point, I would own all of the existing or the remaining shares of Misty. And I could do that. And at that point, I can then take and roll all of the distributions back in and start building up my share count, just like everybody else is. But for that one, I ended up rolling it out and down in strike. So I rolled it out to August 15th from a 22 down to a 20 put, and we'll see if that one can expire worthless, or if it starts getting close to that 20 again, then I may try to roll it down to say 19 or something, right? Move it out a month, roll it down to 19, and maybe make another 20, 30 bucks by doing so. Now this one here is a call, and that's saying that I'm willing to sell my shares at $25. And I've got one contract of that. So if it ever went up to 25 by September the 19th, then it will sell those shares at 25, right? But that's okay because that is above my current price per share, right? So that's all right. You definitely want it to be above this price here if you're selling a call. And I think before it was 25.01, so that's pretty close to the two, right? I mean, it's 1 cent different, and that would have been a 1 cent per share loss. But now, since I did purchase some shares, now I'm looking at a 4 cents gain per share, right? Not looking at a whole lot of gain here, but it was a way to make about $25 for selling a call that I don't believe that it's going to get there within the month. But I could be wrong, and I would not hate it if it did. I'll be willing to try to roll that $25 call up to $26 or $27, right? If it does start getting close to that, and would love to see it get back up to 25 or even higher. So maybe me having that call out there is just enticing enough to get Misty on up to $25 so it can try to sell my shares at 25. Now that's only 100 shares, and I've got a total of 425 shares, right? So that would take me down to 325 shares. So that's my update on my Misty spreadsheet. And let's just quickly do the one for CONY. All right, so now we're looking on CONY here, and this one is an older one, right? I haven't actually updated this one, and I need to do that, and I will next time. But the numbers and everything are right. It's just using Rev 1. If you get the new spreadsheet, it will be the Rev 2 version, this one here, okay? So on CONY here, I'll just enter in my new purchase just to see what my purchase price per share changes to. It's currently at $12.75, and my real price per share here being $9.30. So let's just see what happens whenever I purchase my 10 shares at $9. And since it's below both of these, they both will go down. And that's always something that you want to try to do. If you can buy below your adjusted price per share, that's great. Eventually, it will get so low that it's almost impossible to buy below it unless the stock is just plummeting, right? And at that point, I don't know if you really want to be getting more into it, right? There's something going on then. So let's just go ahead and enter in the date of 7/24/2025. It was a purchase price of $9 even, and I purchased 10 shares. So that takes me to 225 shares. That dropped my share average down to $12.58, and my adjusted price per share here is now $9.23. So I brought them both down, and I consider that as a win. So I think I'm going to wrap it up right there. I hope everybody was able to follow along and hopefully got something out of it. Again, if you are interested in getting the stock tracker sheet here, this is the one that you will get if you do buy me a coffee. And that link is in the description and in the top of the comments usually, but it's definitely always in the description area. So as always, I am not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. Please do your own due diligence before you get into any stock plays. And until next time, legend out.